Yes, so today we will be discussing on the IFRS 2. IFRS 2 is share-based payments. IFRS 2 share-based payments requires an entity to recognize share-based payment transactions in its financial statements, including the transactions with employees or other parties to be settled in cash, other assets, or any equity instruments, as the case may be, of the entity. There are specific requirements that have been included for equity settled and cash settled share-based payments transactions, as well as those where the entity or the supplier both have a choice of paying in cash or in equity instruments. IFRS 2, of course, was issued in February 2004 originally and is applicable to the entities or the periods beginning on or after 1st of January 2005. The goods that include in the goods and services in return for SBP, that is the share-based payments, are uh, inventories, property, plants and equipments, intangible assets, and other non-financial assets. Services can include that are provided by the employees in exchange of equity-based payments or any services that is offered by an outsider to the company or to the organization, or for any services that the organization rendered. Now, there are two notable exceptions to this standard that have been specifically included into this. Shares that are issued in business combination under IFRS 3, which are dealt with IFRS 3 business combinations, they are they are an exception to this. And the contracts for the purchase of goods that are within the scope of IAS 32 and 39. And additionally, the treasury shares that are purchased would also not fall in the scope of IFRS 2. Nor would a right issue where some of the employees are shareholders. Any right issue that is issued to the shareholders will not be accounted for in the IFRS 2. But while the examples that are very specific of IFRS 2 are such arrangement, like accounting that would be accounted under IFRS 2 includes the call options, share appreciation rights, share ownership schemes, payments for services that are made to external consultants based on the company's equity capital. Now, we've got an overview of the SBP, that is the share-based payments. Please use this SBP abbreviation of mine. Just accept that. That is actually an abbreviation I am using for share-based payments. So since we are talking so much about the SBP, let's just understand what was the need for this SBP as different total new standard that was raised for an SBP, because this has been happening for the quite a lot of time. But what was it needed for? In the past, when the companies wanted to pay their employees with any reward, or in any case, like I want to provide a bonus to my employee, I want that my employee has worked so hard, I would like to provide a share based payment, I would like to provide shares to my employees, uh, just to appreciate them. And so this has been happening for the last quite many decades, but they weren't recorded in the financial statements of the company. While if we see, there are actually transactions that are happening between the company and the employees of the company, but they weren't transacted for in the financial statement. A very basic reason is there was no intrinsic value that was attached that could be recorded in the financial statements. Intrinsic value is, let's take an example. I have a company and one of my employee is working very hard. He has worked so much and got a project for me and something like that, and I would like to reward him. So I cannot judge that reward. What is the value of that reward? If I'm providing a share based, if I'm providing shares to my or equity instrument to my employee, I cannot judge the amount, because very basic thing is, let's say in a transaction there are two sides. I would like to go and buy apples. Apples are 40 rupees kg. I get 1 kg of apples and the seller gets 40 rupees. But here the second side is not cannot be ascertained. The reason being you cannot ascertain the bonus or any abstract values. So that was the reason no intrinsic value was attached to it. But presently now IFRS 2 is there, and that and any transaction that is done on such manner is recorded as per IFRS 2. Prior to the issuance of IFRS 2, SBP, that is the share-based payments, there was no any IFRS or any local gap that was covering the recognition and measurement of these types of transactions. This became a key issue for the executives, entrepreneurs, employees, or the directors, given the increasing prevalence of the share-based payment awards in various countries. As share-based payments awards became a larger component of employee and executive compensation, setters believed that the share-based payments, any award on the basis of share-based payment, should form an integral component of the total compensation package. And as such, they concluded that an entity should recognize an expense for the SBP, that is the share-based, it does for the cash compensation. So this was the basic need for my IFRS 2. Now, since we have learned so much about what is IFRS 2 and why was it required, we should judge the scope of IFRS 2. The concept of the share-based payments, the IFRS 2, which it looks into, is broader than the employee's share options. Of course, it is not just confided to the employee share options. It is much more broader than that. IFRS 2 encompasses the issuance of shares or the rights to shares in return of services and goods also. Example of items included in the scope of IFRS 2 are share appreciation rights and employee share purchase plans, employee share ownership plans, share option plans, and plans where the issuance of shares may depend on the market or non-market related conditions. So let's see the first one. It encompasses this IFRS 2 encompasses this share-based payment for its own equity instruments or those of another equity in the same group or a shareholder of any group entity. Coming down to cash settled share-based payment, it is also referred to as liability rewards. The reason being, it is actually in which an entity receives goods and services and it incurs a liability based on the value of the entity's share or the equity instrument. The grant share appreciation right to employees, which is given, entitles the employees to future cash payments based on the increase in its entity share price. So this is an example of a liability award. Liability award as in the cash settled share-based payment. Now the third major point is share-based transactions with cash alternatives. As the name suggests, it is actually a share-based transaction where I have an alternative to take either the equity or the cash. Cash alternatives is where the entity receives goods and services and either the entity or the supplier of the goods or services, that is whoever is the counterparty, has the choice of the entity settling the transaction in cash, other assets, or by issuing the equity instruments. So in the third one, I have an option. I can take a cash, I can take an asset, I can take an equity instrument if I am a third party, that is a counterparty. So we'll be, of course, looking all these in brief. This is all just a brief of this. We'll be looking and elaborating the same. even if an entity cannot specifically determine the goods or services it receives in return for its shares, it must apply IFRS 2. If, for example, the entity has transacted but is unable to decide on the value of the service or the goods that I have received, also then IFRS 2 should be applied. You cannot just circumvent this by saying the value of the goods or services that was received could not be judged. For example, if an entity grants shares to any charitable institution, for example, my entity has granted shares to the PM Relief Fund on this COVID-19 effect, looking at this COVID-19 effect. So of course, there is no benefit that I am getting by doing this charity to the PM Relief Fund. But that transaction is also within the scope of IFRS 2. I cannot circumvent saying I cannot judge the amount of benefit that I'm getting from this charity. So I'm not going to account for that in my financial statements. This cannot happen. Of course, very specifically, IFRS 2 does not include any transaction, any restructuring agreement, that is transfer of assets in a certain group, restructuring arrangements that are said as any transaction with the shareholders that are acting solely in the capacity as shareholders. Just a shareholder, the transaction cannot be here as a share-based payment. Goods and services that are received by the entity, that are settled by entities, shareholders are not within the group. Transactions within the scope of IAS 32 and 39, as I told you, are not in the IFRS visions. And the share-based payment transaction to acquire goods as a part of business combination to which the IFRS 3 business combination applies in a combination of entities or a business joint venture, contribution of a business on the formation of a joint venture. Just hold on, please. There is something going behind outside. Yeah, so as defined by IFRS 11, joint ventures, any joint arrangement, joint ventures, business combinations are not at all within the scope of IFRS 2. They should not be judged into here. They should not be presented here. Now, since we are talking so much about share-based payments, it is very important to clear your base on seeing what are share-based payments. Share-based payment is nothing. Yeah, share-based payment is nothing but let's say any service is received from this person and or an employee. This is the employee of my organization. So if any service is received or provided by an employee, any goods or service is received from any third party or any supplier in a share-based arrangement, then the entity incurs an obligation to settle that transaction with the supplier in a share-based arrangement. Hello? Is my voice audible? Yeah. So yeah, let's start from the beginning because I really thought that my voice wasn't audible. There was a connection problem maybe. Yeah. So what is share-based payment basically is if any service is provided by a third party, this man is the third party, and from any employee also. Any service or goods is received from a third party, the company can get into a share-based payment arrangement where the obligation is made, an obligation is made on the entity side to pay for that transaction, and that transaction can be share-based. Instead of paying it in cash or any kind, I am giving it a consideration of an equity instrument. Just for the people who are not from the technical background and who are unable to understand that equity and share-based payments and this and that, for a very basic example, this is not, do not take it as a Bible or there is something written about this anywhere in the standard or something. It is just for your understanding. I'm providing an example. I would really, I am of this opinion that people would be knowing about that barter system that used to happen. So in barter system, what used to happen is, if I need 1 kgs of wheat, I do not have money, but I have 1 kgs of rice. So a person who is having 1 kg of wheat will give me 1 kg wheat, and I will give 1 kg of rice to him. That was the very basic barter system that used to happen. So just take it for an understanding. This is equivalent to a barter system. Instead of paying the employee or a third party with cash, I am paying it in an equity instrument. I really hope that everyone would have understood what is actually barter system. I mean, sorry, share-based payments, do not take it as barter system. Yes. And now, since we are talking about share-based payments, we have talked about equity settled and cash settled SBPs. Equity settled and cash settled SBPs. Let's first start with the equity settled SBPs, and the reason they are bifurcated is because there are different accounting treatments for that, and that is the reason they have been separated. Any transaction is treated as an equity settled when an entity receives goods or services as consideration for its own equity instrument. Company's equity instrument, and on behalf of that, I am receiving a goods or service in return. So it can be said as an equity settled SBP, where I am receiving, I am not offering, but rather I am receiving a goods or services in return of an equity instrument. I do not have to provide the equity instrument option to the person or the third party or the counterparty. Rather, I am receiving a good or service in return of my company equity instrument. So this is a very simple equity settled SBP example that I have given. Keep in mind, cash settled SBP and equity settled SBP are different, and a different accounting treatment is done in both of them. So it is very important to have clear conditions on what is equity settled and what are cash settled. So the general principle of IFRS 2 equity settled SBP is that an equity entity measures the fair value of goods obtained or services received and recognizes a corresponding increase in equity. But if an equity cannot reliably be estimated by the fair value of the goods that are obtained or the services that have been rendered, it must remeasure their value indirectly using the fair value of the equity instruments that are granted. For the ease of this understanding, any award is provided, let's say any award is provided or any equity instrument is provided to the employee, the entity uses the fair value of the equity instrument that is measured at the grant date and is recognized as the service received date. There are two things here. One, where is equity instrument provided to an employee, and one when an equity instrument is provided to an outsider. So when it is provided to an employee, the fair value of the instrument will be measured at the grant date when I am granting that equity instrument to the employee. But it will be recognized when I've received the service from my employee. And if an equity instrument is provided to an outsider, so of course the fair value of that goods and services will be estimated, measured and recorded on the received date. Whenever I'm receiving a good or I'm receiving a service, so on that date, I'm going to estimate the value of the goods and services. Now, since we have popped up with this grant date model, let's understand what is grant date. Grant date is defined as the date on which the reporting entity and the employee have a shared understanding of the terms of the arrangement and based on a legally binding agreement. This is when you have an employer-employee relationship. Grant date is then, because there is no grant date in terms of a outsider. The reason being, you cannot have a grant date and a recognition date. Anything that has happened on the same date when I have received the goods or a service. So grant date model actually applies to the employer-employee relationship. The determination of this grant date is very critical to the whole share-based payment accounting, because of the measurement of the equity settled share-based payment transactions with the employees. Grant date is the date on which the entity measures such transactions. The implementation guidance of IFRS 2 indicates that the grant date occurs when there is both a mutual understanding on the terms and legally enforceable arrangement. Hence, if there is an award that requires the board or the shareholders' approval to be legally binding on the reporting entity, under IFRS 2, the grant date is not until such approval has been given, even it has been announced at a certain earlier date. I've announced a award to one of my employees on certain date, let's say today, but I am gonna get that approval from my board of directors when this COVID-19 effects finishes and a meeting is held and something like that. So grant date will be taken on that date when I'm getting the approval and not on the announcement date. Now there is one more thing that is known as vesting condition. This is one more vesting condition term that has been very much introduced and included in IFRS 2. The point at which a cost is recognized for goods or services actually depends on the vesting condition. A vesting condition determines whether an entity will receive the service that entitle the counterparty to receive the share-based payment award. So let's say it is a give and take kind of a condition. If you perform this service on this date, I shall provide you with my share-based payment. So you can just assume it to be a give and take relationship. Share-based payment award generally vests upon this meeting of this specified condition. Any specified condition, if met, then the share-based payment award will vest. Now, vesting conditions are of two types. The first is the service condition. Service condition requires that the counterparty should complete a specified period of service during which the services are provided to the entity. This is a very common service agreement that is entered by an employer and employee in the usual day, that is in the current periods also. An employer provides you with the condition that if you're working in the organization for an year, for 2-year period or this year period, you shall be eligible for this award or reward or something like that. So this is a very basic service condition that every one of us must have come across with. Then second is the performance condition. Performance condition is it requires the counterparty to complete a specified period also, and along with that it involves a specified performance target. Now this kind of again I'm stopping. Yeah. Now this performance condition is a kind of condition where the employer sets this condition on you that you shall be in the organization for the next 2 years also, and you shall also provide us with a profit amounting to 10% or 20% or something like that. A very kind of condition can be set upon the employee. So this includes service period along with a target condition. A target has been attached to your service condition. So this is the basic difference between service condition and the performance condition. Performance target, of course, as I told you, performance target can be defined by the reference of the entity's own operations. It depends from entity to entity. There is no set defined rules of this. It may be defined from entity to entity. It depends on the entity what kind of performance target it wants to set. Like achieving an EBITDA target or price of its equity instrument or any sales target or something like that. It can be in any entity specific condition. It is not defined rules or set on that. Now, I will tell you after this, we're going to take two examples of how does share-based payments happen and what are the importance of the vesting conditions, because vesting condition is something that actually really happens in the modern world. This is not just for the part of theory, this is something which happens in the practical world. Under IFRS 2, the nature of the condition, that is either it can be vesting or a non-vesting condition, affects the timing of when the expense is recognized. And in some cases, the measurement of the expense, in addition, if a condition is not met, let's assume my condition is not met, whether or not the entity may reverse the previously recognized compensation expense depends on the nature of the condition that has not met. Let's say I have a service condition and two performance target, a percentage basis also and in terms of number also. So if I am reversing any vested right share-based payment accounting into my financial statements, then it must have that on what condition. Is it on the percentage sales target or the numerical target? What is the condition that is not met? It also depends on the extent of that effect on the whole agreement. Yeah, so let's start with the example. An entity grants 100 share options to each of its 300 employees. It has an entity has 300 employees and it has granted 100 share options to each of the employees. Each grant is conditional that the employee should be working in the entity for not less than 3 years. You cannot turn out or you cannot skip the organization in the period of 3 years. And the fair value that is attached to the share option is $25. It is estimated by the company. Now the fair value has been attached at here. This point only is because it is not affecting with the market condition. Now, of course, there are market and non-market condition into this. We'll be looking at the market condition in further slides. Here, just take it as a non-market condition. It is not attached to any market happening, any market happening of market going up, market going down. I'm asking about saying about the market financial Sensex markets that we have. So it is not dependable on that, and that is the reason a fair value has been attached to it that is estimated by the company. The company has also estimated that 20% of the employees will leave during the 3-year period. Now the company has had this past experiences or something, and on that past experiences they have judged and estimated that 20% of the employees shall leave the company in the period of 3 years, and hence the shares shall be again forfeited because I provided them, and since 20% of the employees will leave the company, so I'll forfeit the shares of those 20% of employees. So this is how I am going to calculate an expense for this. In the year 1, now take one thing very clearly out of this, that this has been done spread over the 3-year period. The reason being, I have actually deferred it. The expenses are deferred on the over the period of 3 years, because I am going to have a liability of paying this amount at the end of 3-year period, and I know it now. So I have actually deferred that amount in across my 3-year financial statements. Now the number of let's start with number of options that will be exercised. Actually, it is 30,000. That is 100 share options are given to each of the 300 employees. Accessible options will be 80%. The reason being, 20% of my employees will leave the company in the next 3-year period. And I've been given a $25 fair value of each share option that has been estimated by the company. So in the first year, I will be dividing my first year by 3 because it is spread over the 3-year period. So current expenses, $2 lakh. Cumulative actually means it with the amount that is being cumulated at the end of the year. So at the end of first year, my cumulative amount that I've accounted for is 2 lakh. Now in the second year, again, I have options still are 30,000. and accessible options out of them are 24,000 at $25 per option. And here I have come down to second year of my 3-year period. So I am just dividing 2 by 3. That is second year amount or expense that will be expensed in my financial position. So current expense will also be $2 lakh. The reason being, this amount is only pertaining to my this year, second year, because though cumulative is 4 lakh, but I have already accounted for 2 lakh in my past year. And in the third year, my cumulative amount that shall be accessible or that shall be accessed by the employees is actually 6 lakhs, and I have accounted $2 lakh in my third year of financial position. So this is the way a non-market condition based vesting rights option, share option shall be accessed by the employee and the employer. Now, after this, these were the non-market conditions. These are usually accessed by, let's say, growing organizations, where their main importance is to hold back the intellectual properties of their organization. Intellectual properties, as in the human capital that they have. They just want to retain their human capital and intellectual rights into their organization, and that is the reason these kind of non-market conditions are vested on them. But when as we grow into bigger companies, market conditions also become a part of them, because if it is a small growing company, is estimating $25 is okay, but when I am a big company like Tata or Reliance, so of course I cannot play around this estimated amount. I will have to link this to my market conditions. If the market is going up, then the rights shall be vested. If not, they shall be forfeited, because otherwise it can create a havoc and it can put me down to losses. But market conditions are only taken into accounts when estimating the fair value of the award at the grant date, and non-market vesting conditions are not taken into account when estimating the fair value of the share or share options at the grant date. Because in the non-market condition, a set estimated amount is provided to the condition, and that is informed to the employees on the day the condition is set, and a legal binding is enforced. Under IFRS 2, entities only recognizes compensation expense for options which non-market conditions if such awards ultimately vest. So ultimately, what options has been vested here? The ultimate options that have vested is only 24,000 options have vested. Though I have given an option of 30,000, only 24,000 of my options were vested. Therefore, if the entity grants options to a large number of employees on one grant date, the entity would need to estimate the number of employees that will terminate. Here I have estimated 20% of my employees that will terminate the employment prior to meeting the non-market performance condition. That is the number of employees that will forfeit awards. The entity adjusts its estimate of awards that will vest at each reporting date, so that on the vesting date, the expense recognized equals the grant date fair value of the options that have been vested. So this is my value of the expense that needs to be recognized, because my 80% of the options will be vested at this amount. Now, let's take an example where I have linked my vesting condition and my share-based payments to the employees, and they are linked to the market condition. I have actually linked it to my market condition. So there is an entity and it is granting 5,000 share options to 2 directors. And the condition is that the directors will remain in employment for 3 years. They're not going to turn out for in the next 3 years. And the market price of the related share increases from $30, which is at the beginning of the first year, to more than $50 at the end of third year. So here I have attached a market condition to it. The market condition is that the market price of these related share, that is these 10,000. 10,000, the reason being two directors have been provided 5,000 shares each. So I have attached a market condition to it. A service condition is there that you should not turn out from the company within 3-year period, but a market condition has been attached to it that the related share price shall increase from $30 to more than $50 at the end of the 3rd year. So the entity determines that the fair value at grant that takes into account the possibility that the share price will exceed $50 at the end of 3rd year. This means that these shares, the share awards will become exercisable. And it has also taken the possibility that the share price will remain below $50 at the end of 3rd year, and hence the options will get forfeited. So I have basically put a condition in the under the market segment. A market condition has been attached. The service condition has been kept secondary. Now the estimated price of the option based on the current market condition. Now this is based on my current market condition is $18. This is the basic working. This is how I am going to calculate it. On the 1st year, again, 10,000 options vested for 1/3. The reason being it is spread over the 3-year period, and current expense at $18 because I am calculating a future liability and it has to be, of course, being created at the present value is 60, 60, and 60. And at the end of my 3rd year period, this will be the amount that will be, if exercisable on this, if my market condition is good and the price of my share increases $50. So this is the accessible amount. And if not, then it shall be forfeited. Now these amounts are actually recognized irrespective of the outcome of the market condition. However, if the directors leave, because we have kept this as a secondary, that if the directors are working for the period of 1 year or 2 year or something like that, if any of the directors leave during the 3-year period, let's say in the 2nd year, the amount recognized during 1st year and year 2, that is $60,000 will be reversed in the year 2. And if they leave in the year 2, the amount of $1,20,000 will be reversed in year 3. This is because the service condition, in contrast to the market condition, was not taken into account when estimating the fair value of the share options at grant date. I am reversing it because I haven't taken this service condition into account. I have taken market condition. And when I'm taking the market condition, it was already established that options shall be forfeited if the market condition doesn't fulfills. So when I am talking about in service condition, I will be reversing the amount. There's a difference between shares being forfeited and reversing my amount in the accounts. So these were the two things that was attached to share-based payment in the market condition and the non-market conditions. Let's come down to cash settled. So this was the only thing that was in the equity settled SBP. I'll just come down to cash settled. Just provide me a minute. I'll have some water. Yeah, in case while I'm having water, any doubts in the past 2 examples, if anyone has, can please type them. I'll just have a glass of water. So shall I start? Anyone has any doubts in the past 2 examples? You can ask also. You can unmute yourself and ask also. If anyone wants to ask a question in the past 2 examples, because we've got more examples, 1 or more, 2 more examples coming down. So at the end of the presentation, it might become confusing. So anyone who wants to ask any questions on the past two examples? I am supposing that there are no questions, and if there are, please just do drop them on in the chat box. I'll go through them while presenting. Yeah, let's start with the cash settled SBP. Any transaction that is considered to be cash settled is when the entity acquires a goods or services by incurring a liability to transfer cash or other assets to the supplier of those goods or the services, who person who has rendered the service, amount that are based on the price, that is the value of the equity instrument. So in equity settled is I received in exchange of my equity instrument. Here I am providing an equity instrument in exchange of any goods and services that have been taken by me, that is the company. So the company is providing an equity instrument to the supplier of the goods or the service person and incurring an equivalent liability for the same amount. In equity settled, no liability is created. The reason being because I have got it. That was an option. Here I am creating a specific liability. The reason being I have to pay them, whether in cash or any other asset, but I am creating a liability in form of my equity instrument because I have to pay them in any future date or any future period. This is the very basic term of me explaining it to you. It is not something that is written in the IFRS. We'll be taking that, of course, but this is a simple explanation kind of a thing. Cash settled share-based payment transactions actually occur where the goods and services are paid for at amounts that are based on the price of the company's equity instruments. The expense for cash settled transaction in the cash paid by the company. The general principle of this IFRS 2 cash settled transaction is that an entity measures the fair value of the goods and services that is received based on the fair value of the liability. So the both things have to be measured, the value of my goods and service and the fair value of my liability that is created, that is the equity instrument that I have created in return of that. However, unlike the grant date model of equity settled awards for employees, an entity remeasures the fair value of the award at each reporting date and on settlement. So here it is remeasuring the amount of the award on every reporting period date. I am actually remeasuring this. The reason being I am creating a liability and it is revalued on the starting of every reporting period. The ultimate cost of the cash settle award is the cash paid to the counterparty, which is the fair value at settlement date. Until the award is settled, an entity presents the cash settled award as a liability on the liability side of your financial position statement, but not in the equity. Thus, changes in the measurement of liability are reflected in the statement of profit or loss and other comprehensive income. We are taking an example, and there is an entity that is granting 200 cash settle awards to each of its 700 employees that it has in the working organization, and the condition is that the employee should remain in the entity for the period of 3 years. The cash is payable at the end of the 3rd year based on the share price of the entity's shares on the date when this period ends. So I have a 3-year period. In the 1st year, I have 40 employees that leave the organization, and looking at my estimates and my working, I am seeing that there will be 60 additional employees that will leave the organization in the period of next 2 years. The share price at the end of this period is $15.20. So $15.20. Second is on the year second, 50 employees again leave my company. And the entity is estimating that 35 additional employees will be there who will be leaving the organization in the third year. At the end of my year 2 period, share price is $18. Now in the third year, uh, um, out of the remaining employees, whoever they were, 15 employees leave my company, and so that award vests for 500 employees because 500 employees are remaining. And the share price at the end of those is $19.70. The first thing that I got while creating this example was I am actually having around 105 employees turning out from my company in the 3-year period. That was really disaster. So let's coming down to the example. Since I've got 105 employees leaving my company, I'm very sad. Let's come down to the example created. I mean the answer. So in the period of first year, there is a difference in calculation. Just to be very specific about that. Number of employees that are working at the first day of the year. This is showing number of employees that are actually working, not the estimates, but they are actually working. So these are the number of employees that are actually working in the first day of the year. Here it is 700. Now the accessible options that I'll be having. The accessible options include those who have actually left and my estimates also. I take my estimated calculation also under my accessible option. So if we see 40 employees left in the first year, I have calculated deducted 40 from 700, and 60 employees is my estimate that shall be leaving my company in year 2 and 3. So subtracted 60 also from that. That comes down to 600 options that shall be accessible. I mean 600 employees that will be accessing the options. 200 options each employee, and 1/3, as I told you, a deferred expenditure is created. Price for that option is this, and it comes down to the calculation for the current period as $608,000. In the second year, I have actually 660. The reason 660 is here is 700 minus only 40, because here I am taking only the employees that are actually working, not any estimate. This is the actuals. So here my 660 is the actual. 515 comes by 600. They were here. Minus 15 minus 35. 50 are the employees that have left the organization, and 35 is my estimate. So 515 have come with this calculation. I'm taking 600 here is the reason it is based on my accessible options on accrual basis, and my estimates also are regarded into the accounting. The price per option here is $18, and it comes down to my current period calculation as $628,000. The reason being it was $12,36,000, out of which $608,000 had already been accounted in the first year. That is the reason the current period amount is $628,000. Now in the third year, my actual employees working on the first day of the year is 645, and the accessible options at the end of the year are 500, because 515 from here and 15 employees left my organization. So only 500 employees will access that 200 each option here. The price per option here is 19.70. While calculating my price option at the current price, that is the price at the year end, is actually $19,70,000. This is the total amount that I have to account for, because this is the amount that the options shall be accessible, and the cash shall be paid to the employees. and 7,34,000 pertains to my third year only amount. So if I calculate all these three, it comes down to $19,70,000. You can also cross check it here. The reason is this is the amount that I will have to I will have to account for when the options are accessible. Now, it may also happen that any employee, there is a condition that the employee will not have to, is not required to provide a service. Let's say that this amount, if I had that this amount of employees, like 200 cash settle awards were to be given to 700 employees, but there was no condition out here. I had put no condition over here that they should be working in the organization for 3 years or something. Like usually in a share appreciation right, share options that are provided to the employees, the entity will recognize the expense and the liability immediately upon the grant date. So I will immediately account in at the time of granting. Let's say on the first day of the year, I had provided this grant to the 700 employees. So I'll immediately account for that in my financial books, that my accounts book. Let's say on the first day, the amount was 15.20 on a very basic $15. My every cash option price was $15. So I shall account for 200 options for 700 employees at the rate of $1,500 per option. So 21 lakh dollars option amount shall be created as a liability in my financial position, financial statements, if no conditions were attached to it. But since a condition is attached here, that is the reason we are accumulating the expenses based on the price per option per year, and we are having a deferred expenditure on this. Deferred expenditure is when an expense I know is going to happen in my future, I defer it over the years when I assume that it should happen. If it is going to happen for 5 years, I'll defer that amount in for next 5 years in my reporting financial statements. Now, it may also happen that these options are modified. Of course, changes do happen. You cannot, changes are inevitable. Changes do happen. So, of course, IFRS 2 has always also provided for modification and cancellations for these. Modification means when the entity modifies or if cancels a share-based payment awards before they vest, because it may happen that the vesting condition is too harsh or burdensome to achieve. You are at the time of creating the condition, it was easy, but when you started working towards the condition, you thought that the condition is too harsh on you. Or if it is a market condition attached to SBP, a share-based payment is attached to a market condition. You may see that the share price of the equity instrument has dropped so far below the exercisable price that it is unlikely it will ever be in the money during its life. You've lost all hopes from your equity instrument. 1 minute, there's a question. Yeah, in the past slide, there is someone asking in the third year value, can you explain again 645 how you got? Okay, 645 I got. I had on the total number of employees that were working were 660, and 15 employees turned out, they left. So I have subtracted 15 from it. Any further questions? Okay, so I shall carry on. Yeah. Yeah, the modification. we were on the modification side. So modification can be done if my conditions are very hard or harsh to achieve. You're welcome. I am very sorry. I couldn't just, I'm unable to pronounce the name. I'm really very sorry for that. But you're welcome. Yes. Look, modification can be done, as I was saying, based on the condition. If the condition is very hard to achieve, very harsh to achieve, it is becoming burdensome, the person is unable to achieve that condition, or if it is linked to a market condition, let's say like in the past 2 to 3 months, the market has gone down so low that for 10 minutes it was closed also. So looking at these present conditions that are actually happening, if a market condition was attached to my SBP and the market price of my share had gone down too low, that I have lost all hopes that it will ever reach the amount set in the condition while the SBP. So I am going to modify my condition. In such circumstances, what does the entity do is it replaces the original vesting condition of the share-based payment award with a less harsh condition. Less harsh is on an easy condition, let's say, on a easy conditions, less onerous one, anything like that, making it easier for the employees to meet the condition of the award. Let's say if there was a condition in the SBP that an employee had to achieve 10% of the total sales volume or 5 lakhs of sales or something like that. But looking at the present condition when the world is in lockdown, of course, no sales is possible. So that condition cannot be met. So of course, you're going to modify that condition so that now it becomes easy for the employee to achieve. You can cut down the sales amount, that is the numerical amount, from 5 lakh to 2 lakh or 1 lakh or something like that, so it is accessible. Employee can get that condition easily, achieve that condition easily rather, sorry. Now also, if the entity is modifying an award, now this is on the theoretical part. What is the practical implication? If any modification is done to award, it is going to recognize the cost of the original award as it had not been modified. So I am going to recognize the cost of my original award, assuming that it wasn't modified. And if modification increases, now since I modified a condition, it may increase the value that is attached to that condition to the SBP award. So I am going to recognize the additional cost. And the additional cost will also be spread over the remaining period. Let's say in the second year, I have changed and modified a condition and it added around 1 lakh of amount to my total vesting amount, the total amount that shall be accessible options. So I'm going to spread it over the 2-year period by 50,000 accounting in my per year books. Any increase or decrease that will be done in the fair value of the award will be a result of the modification and is determined at the modification date. That value of 1 lakh will be determined on the modification date. If I modified the condition on the first day of the second year, so my modification date will be the first day of the second year. I'm not going to take it from a retrospective way. Now there can also be chances of cancellation. Modification is okay, I have modified the condition, and cancellation, I have totally crossed the condition, that is the SBP condition. When any award is cancelled or settled during the vesting period, there are chances I'm settling the whole SBP thing. So if I'm settling it within the vesting period also, it is set to be it is almost equivalent to a cancelled option. It is treated as an acceleration of vesting, and the entity immediately recognizes the remaining amount that is otherwise would have recognized for services over the remaining vesting period. When an entity is paying the compensation for cancelled or settled award, so this is how it is going to be calculated. If compensation is paid at the cancellation, that is the fair value at the cancellation, the accounting will be similar to the redemption of the equity instrument. If an equity instrument is redeemed, the accounting will be similar to that if my this SBP cancellation option has been opted. If at the time of cancellation I am paying, I am settling any condition is settled, then if I am paying an excess amount, then what the amount I shall be paying depending on the fair value of the instrument, of my share price, of the option price. The fair value of the option price, if I am paying it in excess, then it shall be accounted as an expense in the P&L for that period. And if any settlement payment is done, as we were saying in the liability award, any settlement payment is done, then it is accounted as an extinguishment of the liability, extinguishment or the diminishing of the liability. If my liability decreases or it diminishes, as I do an accounting for that matter, I am going to do a similar accounting for this settlement period also. Now, the last part is the disclosures. Disclosures are basically, these disclosures are specifically pertains to the IFRS 2. They have to be put down into your financial statements, and the reason is these three disclosures are specifically jotted down there so that the users of your information know what is being done. If you're not transacting in cash, then how is the transactions taking place, and what are the effects are the effects happening on the entity. Let's say, I'll just give you a very simple example. If I am doing an equity instrument option transaction, so very simple, and the first thing that comes into my mind, if I am an controller or an equity owner, is my control is going to dilute. This is a very basic first thing that comes into the mind. So of course, these share based arrangements and transactions should be disclosed prim and proper into my disclosure agreements pertaining to the financial statements of that reporting period, so that the users of this information and the owners of these information are very specific on how much is the control that they are having, how much is diluted, and what. That is the reason the disclosures to this IFRS is very important. So the first important aspect of disclosure is the nature and extent. What is the nature, whether it is done in as an employer-employee relationship, whether I've done it with an external supplier or a counterparty or a third party. What is the fair value of the goods and services that I have received? Because look, this can also be treated as an a window dressing of the accounts, or rather it can be covered under a wheel of the share based payments. Many things can happen behind the wheel of this SBP. So fair value, whatever the goods and services that have been transacted in accounts with SBP, has to be properly estimated, has to be properly jotted down, reported down there. And what is the base for that amount, whatever the fair value that I have taken, what is the base for that has to be proper. The effect of the share based payment transactions. What is the effect? Effect, as I told you, very basic, is effect dilution of the control or non dilution of the control. If I have written down a liability award, then how it is going to it has any implication on my profit or losses, what has happened. So these three disclosures have to be into your financial statements. You cannot skip it, because otherwise it can materially misstate your financial statements. So I suppose this was it, and any questions shall be welcomed. Please just in case of any questions, just do ask. And if you seem to find a question after the class is ended, you can of course mail us at support@bisptrainings.com. Any questions? I suppose